what's his name? I can't think of anyone's name. I don't know what I'm doing.
Hi, I'm Mo. It is September 7th, and I am here to talk about the books that I've been reading in September. It is time for another vlog-style reading wrap-up. So the first two books that I read in September were Heartstopper Volume 1 and Heartstopper Volume 2. I have Greg at Supposedly Fun to thank for reading these books because he did a video of his August wrap-up where he read Heartstopper Volume 1 and he liked it and it was cute, but he was like, I don't think I want to buy the other books. And I had heard that you could read these books online, that Alice Oseman, the author, originally made these web comics, so you could still find those comics online and you didn't have to purchase them. They were still a free online resource, which is awesome. So I wasn't positive about that, so I did go and look them up, and I did end up reading the first two volumes in this webcomic turned graphic novel. This follows Charlie, who is in high school, and for the last couple of years he was bullied because he was outed against his will and against his wishes, and now he is, I think, a junior or equivalent of junior. I'm a little sketchy on the whole idea of grades anyway, and since this takes place in England, it's a little bit more confusing. He is now settling into being less bullied and making more friends and having a tight-knit friend group, and he gets put in a group with Nick. Nick is a rugby lad and he's an all-around nice guy. They start up a friendship and Charlie quickly develops a crush on him. Although at the beginning of the book Nick thinks that he is straight, he is also developing feelings for Charlie, and they soon start up a romantic relationship. This book is all about high school boys in love and how they are dealing with things like bullying, like anti-queerness, misconceptions about queerness, learning about their own sexuality, learning about their own sexual identities. Charlie is openly out now, even though that wasn't his ideal choice. His family knows that he's out, and he is helping Nick kind of through patience and understanding and love to follow his journey and goal and find his sexual identity. This is very cute. It's adorably drawn. It's a very sweet, loving, patient story, but it deals with some serious topic like sexual assault, bullying, prejudice. It's done in a very gentle, simple way, but it's definitely dealt with. I'm glad to read them online because they're well loved throughout the booktube community, but they're not something that I think I would necessarily pick up if I didn't find them used, if I didn't find them in a little free library. And since they're so well loved, it's probably hard to get them that way because people usually keep them. And I think reading them online also makes me feel very nostalgic for the time when I was reading webcomics, when I was reading comics about sexuality, when I was reading comics about people coming out, when I was reading gay comics, when I was younger, and those things were not as easily found or identified in mainstream media. You had a hard time finding that stuff in books unless you knew the right books to read. You had a hard time finding that in TV and movies unless you knew the right TV and movies. So it was a great time for young artists to really talk about their lives, but maybe talk about them in a little bit of a fantastical way, and to write these autofiction kind of stories, or these fantasy stories that were not high fantasy obviously, but fantasy in that they were worlds that accepted these young queer people. It's very nostalgic for me to read them, but it's also very enlightening and eye-opening to kind of think about what those things meant to me and what they meant to me when I was discovering my own sexuality, when I was discovering my own artist path, when I was figuring those things out. They really meant a lot to me, and webcomics are one of those things that maybe I would never have thought of again, and except that now I'm reading a webcomic. So it's very interesting and exciting. I do think that this story, although it deals with gay boys, is told very much through a female lens, and I think that for that reason it's a little soft. I mean, it's definitely like kind of the yaoi, like gay boy manga style, which is definitely a style and a genre, but it feels very much like a female fantasy of what young gay love would be like. I would love to hear some of the male gay booktubers that I watch kind of talk about this. I would love to hear more of what Greg from Supposedly Fun has to say, because I wonder if it's too sweet and too soft and too feminine to really be a true young gay male experience. This would be a great book to gift to some of my gay friends and then discuss. I think that would be a fun thing. Those are the first two books that I've read in September, and when I read some more, I'll let you know. It is August 12th, and I have finished two more books in August. I finished The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I was listening to this book on audio, and it was okay. So this book is about a kind of world parallel to our own. It is one where magical creatures exist but are policed heavily and required to register. This book follows Linus Baker, who works for a department in charge of magical orphans and magical children. So he goes to orphanages where children with magical powers are kept. Linus Baker loves his job and he takes it very seriously. He does not have magical powers, but he wants to protect these children. Unfortunately, he works within a system that is not necessarily out for the benefit of these children and not necessarily out to help them after they transition out, because in this world, there really is no way for them to be incorporated into normal society. The organization that he works for doesn't allow for individuality. It doesn't want you to put nice things on your desk. It doesn't want you to have a life outside of your working life. So it works its workers very hard and treats them very harshly. Linus is really worried when he's called in to see extreme upper management because he's worried that he's going to get fired or that he's done something wrong. It turns out that Linus is being asked to go on special assignment at a very secret and extreme magical orphanage. He goes to a remote island and he meets some of the most unusual and interesting children that he's seen. He quickly learns that just because these special children are even more special and different than the ones that he's used to dealing with and have possibly a more sinister edge, they are all individuals and they all deserve love, attention, and an opportunity to grow up and become productive, independent members of society. This is a super beloved booktube darling, and it has a slight romance to it. It has a cast of interesting characters. It has strong moral statement to it, and I didn't love it. I didn't hate it by any means. I think I did make a mistake in listening to the audio and not reading this book physically. I think if I had read this book physically, it would have taken me a lot shorter of a time to get through, and I think that would have helped my enjoyment, and I think also it would have not been so much geared towards YA. This is an adult book. I would say it's definitely new adult as opposed to regular adult or literary. There are a lot of themes of tolerance, acceptance, of learning to love yourself, of accepting and understanding your flaws and working through them, of making mistakes and being able to learn from them and move on, which are all great messages, but this book really just hit you over the head with it. The reader for this book was very juvenile and did the voices and cadence in a very young adult, magical way, and that just really fell flat for me. And then on top of being constantly told what the moral of the story was over and over and over again, it just felt too young for me as a reader. So I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it. I liked the story enough. I thought there were some good takes on the magical person kind of tropes where there are young magical creatures and them kind of coming into their powers and understanding who they are and understanding that this great power brings great responsibility and that we have to take care of each other and protect each other, but also teach others to be tolerant as well. Ultimately, I liked this book, but it just didn't do for me what it's done for everyone else on BookTube. I didn't think it was so amazing. I thought a lot of the children voices were super annoying. I thought that there was a lot of pretentious over explaining of very basic things. And again, I can see coming to this as a new adult or a older young adult that maybe you need those things to be so spelled out for you. I also think that this was told in a fairy tale-esque kind of way, which makes sense for it to be so spelled out, but it fell flat. It just wasn't engaging or enticing or interesting. The House in the Cerulean Sea, I think, made me feel a little old, but it also made me feel really happy that the author created a universe where people understood that tolerance and patience and love and acceptance was important. And it also made me feel really sad that the author felt the need to write a book like that, and that our society needs books like that to tell us not to discriminate against people, not to hate people, not to harm people. We shouldn't need that. So it was a little bit uplifting and a lot depressing. The next book that I finished in September, I actually finished this morning, and that was Octavia Butler's Dawn. This is a sci-fi book. I read it for Sci Fi September, and I got it in a free little library. I've only ever read one other Octavia Butler book, which was Fledgling, which I really enjoyed, even though it has some very disturbing subject matter. Dawn is about Lilith, who wakes up after the world has been destroyed by nuclear bombs and almost everyone on the earth has died. She was one of the people who survived the major warfare, but because the war destroyed the climate and the ozone, everyone was either going to freeze to death or starve to death or kill each other. And she kind of was in a place in her life where she was ready for that to happen. So when she wakes up in a mysterious environment, she's not sure if she's happy that she's alive or dismayed. She kind of comes to learn that she is being held by a unknown force. They start to wake her at more regular intervals and speak to her more, and eventually they come into her prison cell and they are extraterrestrials. They are very strange looking and they're very, very terrifying at first to Lilith and other humans. So she kind of comes to find out that these aliens have saved her and a few other humans that survived the wars, and they want to restore them to Earth. She's been captive for hundreds of years and kept in suspended animation, and the aliens are interested in intermingling their genes. They're a gene splicing species. They've kind of enhanced her abilities and they want to return her and other humans to the Earth so that these alien species can live on the Earth and she can live on the Earth. That is how this alien species perpetuates their species, by kind of dividing, gene splicing, and then living on the new kind of planets or environments that they've created. The basic premise is that Lilith is captured. She's told what these aliens want to do and that they saved her, and she's kind of groomed for being able to help other humans to move back to the Earth. There's a lot of interesting things in this book. It was written in the 80s. It's obviously a classic sci-fi in the sense that it deals with a lot of topics that many books were not able to deal with at the time. So it deals with sexuality, it deals with gender nonconformity, it deals with family unit and biracial integration. It deals with racism. It deals with sexism. It deals with homophobia. It deals with vegetarianism, actually, interestingly. And the idea that although we as a species know the right thing to do, we as a human species are going to make the wrong decisions, and why that is and how we can change that and become something better and something different. The motivations of these aliens are always made clear to be beneficial to both humans and the Onkali, which is the alien race. The Oankali have a male and female gender, and they have a third gender, which are the part of the species that can do the gene splicing and can perpetuate the race. So the way that their kind of family units work is to have a male and a female and this other gender as a family unit, and they're adopting a human or a human couple to be part of their family when they return to Earth. It also talks about kind of the idea of if you are in mortal peril and someone saves you and wants you to thrive, are you still their captive? It deals with body anonymity and the idea that you should be able to control your own body and your own perpetuating of that body, of having children and things like that, on your own. No one should be able to force you to do that or tell you how to do that. Although the Oankali are helping humanity, Lilith has a lot of anger and rage that she is being forced to change her body. She's being manipulated on a genetic level to bear Oankali children at some point, and that her children and their children are going to be intermixed, and they are going to be something other than human and something other than Oankali. It's saying a lot, it's doing a lot. The whole time that you're introduced to Lilith's new Oankali family is the most part of the book. That's the biggest part of the book, and her getting used to them, and the idea that humans fear otherness and fear things that are scary to them and that are different than them, and fear things that look strange. And a big part of it that she has to learn for them is to get over her fear and then to be able to teach other people how to get over their fear as well, so that they can eventually go back to Earth all together and live together and intermingle their genes. And then of course there's like a whole sex part, right? So like there's the whole idea of classic sci-fi dealing with like sexual elements and sexual freedoms and how sex is used potentially as a benefit or a weapon or whatever, right? That's a very classic sci-fi theme. And so I really thought that the whole beginning of the book, the whole first part of the book where she's dealing with the family, was going to be a lot more about the alien sex and the alien sex organs and whatever else. And they kind of sort of hinted at the beginning, but they don't make it clear that that's what it is until like the last third of the book. The last third of the book is about her awakening other humans and preparing them to return to the Earth. The last portion of the book is about how the humans can or can't deal with the Oankali, but a lot of it is about how the Oankali kind of manipulate the humans through pleasure, which is basically sex. It's not like intercourse sex, but it is like a sexual element that happens. That becomes a really big focus of the end of the book, which is fine because it does make sense in the story in a certain way. But on the other hand, it's like, why wasn't the first a little bit more geared towards that? Was that editing? Was that because it was found to be too sexual? Was that because Butler didn't want you to only see the sex part? She wanted you to hear the other things that she was saying and the other kind of commentary that she was making? I'm not sure. And then the other weird aspect is the Oankali who first talks to Lilith then turns her over to his child. His child is the third gender, and Lilith is bonded with this child while it's still a child, is then asked to help the child mature. And so Lilith and this child form a friendship bond and a slightly paternal bond because she has to help this child grow up. But then later, that child is the child that she like has sex with and gives her this pleasure. And then even later when Lilith is encouraged to take a human mate, this child, now grown up, Lilith and the human mate all have sex together. And it's a really strange aspect of the story that Lilith and this child grew up together in a lot of ways because Lilith was learning the Oankali language and she was learning from it. So they're a bonded unit in a parental teacher way, both Lilith being the teacher and her Oankali companion being the teacher. And then later they're bonded in a like sexual relationship and a familial relationship. So it's very strange. And weirdly, the other book that I read by Octavia Butler also had to do with having sex with someone that you saw as a child and then was not a child. So that was Fledgling, and in Fledgling, the main character is a vampire, but she's a vampire in the body of basically like a 12-year-old girl. It might even be younger. It might be like 10. She meets a human that helps her, and as they grow together, they also form a sexual relationship together. Now, the vampire is very, very old, way older than the human, way more mature, has lived way more life, but she looks like a child and he's having sex with her. So there's this very strange aspect in both of these books of the idea of consent, of the idea of when children become sexually mature, about how you can grow with someone as seeing them as a child to having sex with them as an adult. There's a lot to unpack there that like I just haven't yet. And obviously, like, I just finished this book and I haven't unpacked a lot of things about it. I really liked it and I thought there was a lot there that was interesting. There are 3 sequels, so I definitely plan on reading those 3 sequels. And I've definitely broken my rule of just talking about this book for 5 minutes, but it was very thought-provoking and very interesting, and I appreciated it a lot because it did all that, but it did it in a very simple language, in a very simple, clear writing style. So it was extremely engaging and easy to read, but then it was extremely complicated and hard to wrap your head around. The way that this book made me feel was confused and interested. I guess it made me feel a little lost and maybe a little dumb in that, like, I didn't get everything. It definitely made me think, which was good. I have not been reading a ton in September, but I will see you when I read some more. Here's mine. It is September 29th, and I have read 3 more books in September. A lot of these books I finished a while ago, but I just haven't had a chance to sit down and film my little recaps. So I finished Heartstopper Volume 3. I've been reading these all online. I won't say much because I already talked about the first 2 earlier in this video, but 3 was just as cute, and the relationship between Nick and Charlie is progressing. They kind of want to tell each other that they love each other. They kind of want to do more than just kind of kiss and make out. They go to France in this volume. They go with their school friends and they feel very accepted and very much part of a community with these friends. I like these books. They're very sweet. They're very cute. I like the nostalgia feeling that I get from reading the webcomics. I like the idea that there are young people who are able to read these and see themselves in them. I appreciate all those things. This book really didn't have any new feels for me. The next book that I read in September was Starship Troopers. This was by Robert Heinlein, and this is a book about a young man, Juan Rico, who enlists in the army despite his parents and specifically his father's wishes. But his best friend is enlisting in the army, so he does as well. And it's definitely more than he expected it would be. It's grueling, it's hard. Cadets and trainees die and are injured and run away and are executed or are reprimanded for not doing what they're supposed to do. But he finds that he has an affinity for this kind of life. He likes being a soldier and he likes being told what to do and he likes to do the best that he can do at that lifestyle. So he decides he's going to become a career soldier. Now, the first part of the book is kind of told in one kind of present day. Then you look back at his time as a trainee and as a cadet and learning to soldier. And then it goes forward again past the original space in the end of the book, and you see kind of more about who they're fighting and what they're fighting for. They're fighting for Earth, and they're fighting against the bugs, which are this race of aliens that has come down and invaded Earth and destroyed colonies. Kind of realize through context that this is a time when Earth has kind of colonied out to other planets like Mars, and these bugs have come in and they are having to fight them. Pretty classic
premise for sci-fi, for sure. It is a classic, so that premise did come from this for a lot of things. For instance, Ender's Game has some similar themes to this, but I think that Starship Troopers has a lot more to say about war and soldiers and morality than it does have to say about alien fighting. And I think that that was a little bit jarring at first and maybe a little bit disappointing, because I thought we were gonna get like alien war, fight, shoot, kill, whatever, which is not like, I don't like look forward to that, but I thought it would be more about that. And then what we really got was more like, what is the morality of being a soldier? Like, what is your moral imperative as part of a population that is under attack? What is the morality of attacking someone else? Like, how can you fight someone? And how should you fight someone who's fighting you? What do you have to do when those circumstances occur? It was really, really interesting. I can hold it up. I think it was really interesting to read Starship Troopers and Dawn right around the same time. That was about a race of aliens who, yes, they have ulterior motives, but their big motive is to perpetuate the species and the race of Earthlings and to let the world heal. Starship Troopers is definitely about a warring race, and it's us, but it's also about how war was pretty much done away with Earthlings until aliens came and threatened us. And it's an interesting juxtaposition with Dawn. There's definitely like a lot more to delve into, and I think also there's maybe some commentary or thought to be put into women written sci-fi versus male written sci-fi. It would be interesting to kind of do a compare and contrast for these two, or at least think more critically about both of them together. That's something that maybe I would like to do in the future. The third book out of these books that I have read, the seventh book that I have read altogether in September, is Leon Trotsky's Fascism, What Is It and How to Fight It. Now, this was written in the early 1900s. It specifically talks about like French, Italian, European idea of fascism and the bourgeois and its rise to power with the Nazis, Hitler, Mussolini, people like that. So it's dated in that it like references and speaks to specific instances in history of fascism, how the working class and the communists can approach fascism, fight fascism, and conquer fascism. I listened to this on audio, and I have to say, like, the vast majority of it went over my head. Maybe if I had been reading it physically, I would have gotten a little bit more out of it, because I would have been able to like kind of go back and read over things and like mull over things that I had read. Some of the basic ideas that I got was just the idea of consumerism and capitalism and how that is cyclically bad for society, and how capitalism is a perpetual problem where it makes people kind of happy and think about nothing, not think about their problem. All these cyclical things that kind of make society happy and then make it sad, and then make it happy and make it sad. And then that as a way to, I mean, I'm totally simplifying here, but that as a way to control the populace and keep the populace from thinking of bigger problems that the world has and bigger problems that they have, and controlling them through that kind of cyclical nature of like, oh, you want a thing, like, I'm going to make you want this thing even more. Now you have the thing, now you want another thing. I also thought that he said something really interesting about how regimes and leaders and ideals change. So like, you might have a president, you might have an emperor, you might have a king, but the police stay the same. The police force always stays the same. And the reason to have the police force is to control the workers, to control the everyday people. Just because the overarching leadership changes, the system of the police doesn't change, which I think is very relevant to today and interesting to note, and how the police are made to police the working class and what that means. I didn't get everything that he wanted to give out of it, but the things that I did get were very interesting. And I think that one of the best things was that I read P.G. Wodehouse, and P.G. Wodehouse talks about Leon Trotsky. He talks about different political philosophies and political ideas. And of course, Bertie Wooster is like, you know, he is the bourgeois. All he wants to do is like get free money from his aunts and like lounge around and like go to parties and have a good time. So like he is the bourgeoisie. It's funny because he's always kind of scoffing at those people, and so it was funny to read the actual work of Leon Trotsky and know the reference to P.G. Wodehouse. I would like to read something more modern on fascism and kind of how the idea of it has developed over time and not geared in like a communist way, like communist versus fascism. I think it would be interesting, or communist versus capitalism. Like I just think it would be interesting to see other points of view versus fascism. As far as how it made me feel, I mean, I guess it made me feel a little dumb because I didn't get a lot of it. I did enjoy it, and it was, I think, a good historical text to have read. I am planning on finishing a few other things before the end of the month, so I will catch up with you then. It is after September. It is October, the beginning of October, and I read 2 more books in September. I read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This one, I did not read this entire book, but this is the copy that I had. So I read just The Metamorphosis in this book. I read The Metamorphosis because Kevi said that it was one of her favorite books, one of her favorite stories, and I had never read it. And I was like, how could I never have read this? I thought it was like some deep philosophical teaching story, but it really is actually just a story about a young man who is the breadwinner for his family. He's taking care of his family, working as a clerk and a traveling salesman, and he wakes up one day when he's supposed to go to work, and he has turned into a giant cockroach. So he is a giant cockroach in his bed. The whole story is kind of about how he struggles to come to grips with this idea that he is now this animal, and how his family reacts and his job reacts to him being an animal as well. I mean, there obviously are like deeper meanings and implications of the story, but like mostly it's about a guy who turns into a giant cockroach. Like I thought that was like a metaphor or a philosophical like look at something, but like I didn't think that that literally happened in the story, but it happens in the story. I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked the kind of classic writing. I'm sure it depends on the translation that you get. This one was translated by Stanley Applebaum. This book made me feel so sad. It was so tragic. I don't like animal violence and animal death, and this definitely has animal violence in it, the way that because he's different and because he's like considered a burden on the family, the way that he's treated, but he's also treated like an animal with the lack of respect that people often treat animals. I found this to be very sad and very depressing. There were comedic elements and there were kind of funny parts. Mostly it was just really, really sad. And then the 9th book that I completed in September was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This one I happened to pick up at a free little library just a few days before the end of the month. Here's the little free library information, and they have a cute stamp that they put in the books. It was so perfect to be able to read this for Sci Fi September and complete one more science fiction book. Binti is all about a young girl who lives in a pretty remote and small tribe on Earth. She is the first of her people to be accepted to this exciting and renowned college off planet. So she's the first of her tribe who's ever going to move off planet, the first of her people who are ever going to go to college. The reason that she was picked to go to this college is because she is a mathematical genius. In this future, math is used to create and fuel technology. Her family and her father and she have this great gift to be able to manipulate math and therefore like manipulate technology. As she's heading to the university, her first time in a spaceship, the spaceship is attacked by these creatures
who are at war with one of the humanoid factions. I don't want to say more than that. This book had a lot of really interesting science in it. It had a lot of like futuristic science. It had a lot of references to Binti's people and their traditions and how those traditions work with that future science and how past science plays a role in that as well. How she really leans on her experiences as this tribal member and this close community to help her through navigating this completely different new universe that she has never seen and was never supposed to see. I definitely think that the way that this story was told was a choice, was chosen. There's no chapters and it's very broken up into like little sections. There's a lot of things that are kind of repeated, and I think that kind of has to do with the Afrofuturism and the kind of pulling on African traditions and African heritage. Although I don't know that because I don't know a lot about those things, I feel like that was specifically a choice that the author made to be able to do that. The author is American, but she's of Nigerian descent. It's hard to say whether this book was an adult book, a young adult book, or a new adult book. I think it's probably leaning towards young adult. Binti is only, I think, 16. A lot of the themes are like making friends and like leaning on your found family and discovering your strengths. But I think this book captured well and made me feel that feeling of going away from your family, going away from the things that you know, learning about new things, and finding the way that you can work and walk in a new place, in a new world, and how you rely on things that you knew and how you learn new things. So it definitely had that feeling of like growing up, and it had that feeling of new experiences. I think that there were some things that were like a little bit confusing, and I don't know if that was the writing style or if that was just the new science and the new language that I was learning about. There are definitely parts where I was a little bit, not confused, but unsure of exactly how things looked or what exactly physically was happening at that time because of the way that things are described. But I didn't mind that. I thought that it was interesting and that there was some new sci-fi elements to this that I really enjoyed learning about. I feel like the bad lighting is just a portend of things to come. I feel like I might never have good lighting again. It is a dreary day. We're doing what we can. Here we are for the wrap-up of my September wrap-up. Something worth noting is that I read 9 books in September, many of them very, very short. I read quite a few very short books. I read 3 webcomics, read the 3 Heartstopper volumes, which are kind of longer. I read 2 audiobooks, one of which I have a physical copy of and one of which I don't. That all being said, it feels like I didn't read a lot. I don't do a page count, but I definitely read less page-wise, I think, than I normally do. I was thinking about it, and one of the reasons for that is that I read a book that I have DNF'd. I never talk about DNFs in my wrap-up because most of my DNFs are soft DNFs, and they are books that I'm going to come back to at some point, or at least I think I will, so I keep them in a separate space on my red shelf for the year, and then hopefully if I want to pick them back up, I can pick them back up and I can come back to them. I wanted to mention that I did DNF The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Not forever. I made it to page 260, so, you know, a little under like a third of the way through the book, and I was really enjoying it when I picked it up, but it was just not compelling me to pick up. And I actually got to a part where there's kind of a problem that they have to solve, and it's kind of a potentially like deadly problem, and I realized that I was just kind of bored. I know, I'm sorry, Becky Chambers fans, I'm sorry. I think maybe her short novellas would be better for me than this chunker of a book. You know, I don't do well with long books anyway. I want to find out what happens, and I'm sure I will finish this book at some point. So out of the 9 books I read a bunch of sci-fi, obviously, for Sci Fi September. I read some things that could kind of be considered sci-fi, like The Metamorphosis and The House in the Cerulean Sea. So I wouldn't necessarily qualify those as sci-fi. I would qualify them more as fantasy, but I really liked the kind of juxtaposition of Dawn and Starship Troopers, and then actually Binti also kind of could fit in here as a look at war and the future of war and how people communicate and how communication is a big part of ending a war or starting a war. I thought that was really interesting. I liked the idea of Dawn and Binti being more about how to move forward from war and how to pick up the pieces and become better, whereas Starship Trooper was more if you need to be in war to save your species, and doesn't that make sense? And doesn't saving one life make up for killing other lives? Very interesting. I was happy to read a classic that I've never read before. I found it kind of heartbreaking, but I did enjoy that. This is a work in translation. I got to read a set of booktube darlings in Heartstopper, which I enjoyed. I got to read a booktube darling in The House in the Cerulean Sea. There was quite a bit of queer rep in Heartstopper and Cerulean Sea. I read some works of people by color. I read some classic sci-fi. I read some modern sci-fi. I read books by women. I read books by men. I read some trans rep, which is unusual for me, but I love that. Overall, I don't think that my reading month was one of the better ones. I think I struggled a little, and definitely some things put me into a little bit of a reading slump, but I did enjoy a lot of the things that I read, or I'm glad that I read them. I didn't feel good after I read them, but I really enjoyed them. That was my September. Have you ever read any of the books that I read in September? If you have, leave a comment below saying which ones you read and what you thought of them. Did you participate in Sci Fi September? If you did, let me know what you read for that as well. I also have a request for my regular viewers and my viewers. So my booktube birthday is coming up this month. My booktube birthday is October 13th, and I have plans to do some booktube birthday related videos. But also I'm very, very close to having 100 subscribers, which I'm super excited about as well. And what I would like to do for both those events is a little Q&A video. So if you have any questions about anything that you've ever thought of while watching one of my videos, please leave it in the comments below so I can go through and have more questions for my Q&A. Ask me about books, ask me about zero waste, ask me about homeschooling, ask me about the service industry, ask me any questions that you like. And thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!